did that conversation last?
Probably like 30, 45 minutes.
And then you went to work?
One thing that makes Death Note so fun when it comes to its material is the insistence on unique, flavorful characters in supernatural circumstances doing their best to act genuine and realistic among their normal peers. Whether this is to catch the culprit or prevent themselves from being caught, this game of back and forth is most likely and arguably the central appeal of Death Note. And while there are certainly over-the-top and semi-typical anime cliches present in Death Note throughout that are not realistic or feel more archetypal rather than real, including some of said characters, the general character writing, as I've come to think, is extremely accurate when it comes to the accused and accusing, more so than countless other shows that try the same, and more impressively, some more so than our natural intuition may even lead us to believe. I went to college as a double major in philosophy and psychology and took many classes in general, criminal, and developmental psychology, as well as watching a lot of Jim Can't Swim videos, so obviously I'm a genius. Now, while I'm not professional or necessarily even a reliable source, I do hope something partially sunk in with me, as I did find these parallels to real crimes that are indeed mimicked accurately by many of the people in the story of Death Note. Today, in a very different way from before, I want to talk about how Death Note's writing accurately portrays characters as innocent or guilty, and more so, how it does that when confronted with an allegation. One evening, I decided to make myself some spaghetti and toast before editing a recent video, and instead of putting up a YouTube video like I may usually do, I felt nostalgic and I popped up on Netflix to play Death Note instead. Despite Death Note being really far from episodic, I put on the 17th episode, Execution, which, in its first half, I think covers some of the most realistic reactions in the series. At this point, Light, Misa, and Light's father, though with him it's just out of personal feeling of obligation, have been placed in detainment for 50 days under suspicion of being Kira. Light, foreseeing the decision, met with Misa previous to this episode and had actually hid the Death Notes as well as passing one on to a new master, before a few days into confinement, giving it up, and losing all of their memories of everything that has come so far. This video will address some true incidents of crime, but will try to give you a sanitized, factual portrayal of the events without any unnecessary or shocking details. Still, if that bothers you, you've been warned, and thanks again to true crime channels such as JCS and Monsters for the inspiration of this video. Lastly, this video by no means intends to make light of any real crimes, and is merely using them as a form of documented evidence that is comparable to what the series shows in its strength of writing. In true crime interrogations, consistently and without fail, those trying to prove and persuade interrogators of their innocence will often do so in gentle denials, in some case continually denying not the accusation made on them, but the apparentness of the crime itself. This is apparent in cases like the supposed mercy killing of Elaine Campion of her two daughters.
Only you can tell me that.
I don't understand. And I don't understand and I don't. And the next thing I know is I got people at my house. A guy with a blue outfit with orange on it in my bedroom. As a police officer telling me something about charges. I'm asking where my daughters are.
Or the more famous murders of Chris Watts of his two daughters and wife.
How long did that conversation last?
Probably like 30, 45 minutes.
And then you went to work?
I left about 5:15, 5:30, in that time frame.
And she said she was going to a friend's house with kids.
But she was still here when I left.
While the stories of these criminals usually change as the more undeniable information is brought forward, the first step is to deny the assertion that the crime even happened in the way that the police accuse. Another route people seem to take is the insanity attempt, which is surprisingly harder to fake than people seem to think, as probably everyone watching this video has already seen. Because of that, and because it's not personally displayed or relevant to Death Note, I'm gonna pass over explanation on this one. The last one that seems most common as a defense though for me, from what I've seen, whether man or woman, how severe or how irrefutable the evidence, is the criminal to give a state of vague compliance, to agree that the action was horrible and the person should be brought to justice, offering any information that they can to supposedly help. This includes offering long, overly detailed answers to questions and seemingly not sinking in that they are being accused as a suspect, even when the accusation is staring them down. I think this happens because it follows the general intuition of what an innocent person would say or do. If you're innocent, then there's nothing to hide. It's how the general thought goes. So if you seem to be disclosing lots of not necessarily relevant or provable true information, it seems like you're comfortable and compliant. While different personality types deal with this differently, and some criminals are smarter than others, this is actually a trap that can almost never be done accurately, as a long explanation will become more detailed and outlandish to separate the criminal from matching their evidence. And the stressful long-term circumstances most of these people go through in their interrogations surrounds them with a lot of time to forget and misplace. It's bound that eventually, when repeating and re-repeating, that something is going to be mixed up when retelling the stories later on. Something important. This is what catches them in their lie, and is something that interrogators, to my knowledge, actively employ, as having a witness who has been proven to lie will allow the case to cross understandably more smoothly. This obviously happens because of the inability to remember the web of information that they sprouted as an alibi. While an innocent person will actually usually say less than someone who's guilty, and has minimal confusion with important details as their events are based on pure recollection, instead of made-up stories and mixtures of truth and lie. How does an innocent person act then? I think that's perfectly seen in Light Yagami. Light is compliant and he believes the report of the officer rather than pretending not to understand or trying to convince the interrogator of a possible second conclusion, at least off the bat. Of course, at this point, Light knows L, and L knows Light. Light knows that L knows that he is competent. So, if he hadn't lost his memories, this may have still been a line of logic that he would have taken. Still, it's realistic to comply with the information and take it as serious, being gravely frightened by the news that seems to point to him. But when the accusation of "he did it" comes up even when the explanations are trying to be provided by a genuinely confused, memoryless Light, it's not only the fear of being put away wrongly, but the anger at seeming incompetence of L that shows its face. While not being violent, aggression as a form of convincing an interrogator, while not intuitively a route toward convincing yourself of innocence, is often the primal reaction people make when faced with the dread of unfair punishment and uneasiness that the actions may continue because they know that they are the wrong person. Anger, pleading, normally eye contact, although that isn't so possible here, the well of extreme separate emotions pushes them to behave this way, partially because it's all that they can think to do. The idea of them rotting for somebody else's crime isn't just bad for them, but is bad for the world, as the criminal remains out there. And unlike a criminal who has probably rehearsed and thought through a multitude of different stories, alibis, and answers, an innocent person is much more unlikely to give as much thought or detail, instead believing if they say what they are asked, everything will work out because they're innocent. That's why such an aggressive response is sometimes caused, while intuitively we think we would interpret that as just defensiveness. Misa does seem to come off as more guilty though this is not because of an unrealistic portrayal on Death Note's writing's part. She genuinely has no memory of the accounts and, under her weird circumstances of being blindfolded and tied up, believes genuinely that she has been lied to, and believes instead that she's being held captive by some perv. This, of course, holds some levity in context of the show, but from someone not aware of the genuine memory loss, this likely mimics plenty of guilty criminals who do lead for the first method of denial that I mentioned earlier. Since this is a unique circumstance though, it actually ends up leading L to a theory that ends up being semi-correct. The idea that the memory of their actions have been taken from them, and that Shinigami and the idea of Kira can be passed on person to person. Still, in situations not including the paranormal, as far as a general interrogator will know, they are coming across as genuinely guilty. Lastly, and this is less true crimey, but it's also a subtle bit of realism that I think sells the drama in Death Note, It's the way that Misa and Light react to the gun, with Light's pleading turned on them from his father. The way that he desperately moves toward his father before flinching with his eyes closed, anticipating the blast. The way that, through the scene goes, they go on the aggressive and switch to the defensive, fighting for their life while also fearing the weapon. And it's just genuinely incredible and an underrated scene, underrated both for the emotion, the animation, and the directing as a whole. Of course, this is also balanced with the second half of the episode, which I find almost comical as much as I enjoy it. Apparently, in only 50 days of detainment, maybe a month or so longer, a ginormous building exclusively made for catching Kira is built. Light and Elle get handcuffed together, and Elle allows Misa to see him despite the fact that everyone there is still convinced she is or at least was the second Kira who could kill through only sight. I mention this as just a reminder that while I find this show a masterpiece, it's not always from the realism, but how enjoyable of an experience it provides from all colors of life. Still, I'm sure if you've seen the series, you would know that there are plenty more good examples that I could be bringing up, of things that happen throughout the series. So if you feel like there's anything else I should have included, or that you find personally interesting in regards to how Death Note deals with true crime behavior, comment down below and I'll try to respond to it, as well as any of your other thoughts on this very unique kind of video. I hope you found this as interesting as I did, and if you want uncut or uncensored versions of a handful of my videos, as well as your name at the end of each video, please subscribe and become my patron. A special thanks to my top patrons: Friendly Neighbor, Whizbang2093, Daniel Frousing, Jared Summers, Rune, My Name is Klein, and all my other patron and Twitch supporters. If you want to speak with me directly, I hold a Discord call for all of my patrons at the first of each month, and I would love to see you there. Thanks very much for the support, and I'll see you soon.